the space between spiritual, physical, metaphysical, and digital,
Mhm.
is is all blending.
Welcome everyone to What the Photo. My name is André Leon, and this is my second interview with one of the photographers that I really admire. And today I will interview Jon Lowenstein, an American photographer from Chicago, founder and member of the agency Noor, and possibly one of the photographers that have followed best the question of Latin migration to the United States and the communities of African Americans in Chicago. I mean, like by a white photographer that have done that, that has spent so much time uh, researching, living with these communities, which is very interesting because Jon Lowenstein, he is also the son of a Jewish migrant that came to the United States when he was only 12 years old. He came to the United States from Germany, Nazi Germany, arrived alone, and later on he was joined by his parents. There were no one knew if his parents would make or not to the United States, but in the end they did, and John's family established in America, and today John is reflecting about the subject of forced migration. Um, what can I say about John as a person? I think that John is most of all a very human person, a very positive person, and a very funny guy, a very easy person to talk with. And I think that his pictures, they reflect that. They reflect seriousness, but they also reflect the idea of being together. And by being together, we can't be together all the time, having a kind of, you know, re- resentment about the past, about what happened. Even if his pictures are showing people in a very difficult situation, doing what they have to do, taking the chance they have to take to realize their dreams of having a better life. However, John is capable of showing humanity, of showing that all these sacrifices, in many cases, that these people are doing, they are aimed to something that in the end everybody hopes to become a better life. So, with nothing else to say, I would like to invite you to follow this interview to the end. Um, and if you like the interview, to leave your sign of satisfaction there with a like in this video. And if you could follow the channel to increase our view time, this is very important for the channel. And that's it, okay? So please enjoy this conversation with Jon Lowenstein. Thank you very much.
So this is, technology, man.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. How are you? Good?
Great, great, man.
Yeah. You look good, man.
Hey, you
Long
too.
hair, long beard.
Oh man, this quarantine beard thing,
It's the quarantine beard thing. You're
Yeah.
good.
Finally, I gotta trim it though. I gotta trim it a little, clean it up.
Yeah, no, looks good, man.
Thanks, you too, bro.
Yeah.
I like it, man. But you're a lot more clean, you got the look.
Yeah. Well, people say that I like, I paint my beard because like, I'm all like near like 50 and I don't have like, any
That's
gray hair.
great.
And then I hate when people say that when I look at people like you, I say, well, that's normal. So I like
Yeah.
black beard is it feels ugly, man. It feels very
That's
ugly.
awesome, dude. You don't have to paint it. That's good.
Yeah, they say, oh, you're painting your beard, or like no,
Yeah,
I'm not.
right. Like, oh,
Yeah.
oh
So,
man.
so you're in Chicago now, right?
I'm actually in Canada right now.
Oh, in Canada. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
You
because I
live,
share my time now between Chicago and Canada.
so you're living in
Because
Canada.
yeah, I live part-time Canada, part-time Chicago with my family.
Right.
With my
Okay.
wife, I got married, I have a kid and everything, man.
And your
So
wife is Canadian.
yeah,
Wow.
so I'm like, oh man, I went bi-national. It
Yeah.
was very, now I can't move. I can't move sometimes because of all this quarantine and it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's good though. I have a 3-year-old now, so I love that.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, you know,
It changes
it's
life,
really
right?
nice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's
Mm.
a good thing, man.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. Yeah, I don't shoot as much, but I love when I'm with the family. So it's great, dude.
Yeah.
You got kids?
Yes, I live here in Italy because, I was born in Brazil. Then
Right.
I lived like 20 years in Norway,
Oh
and
wow.
and then I met an Italian woman,
Oh yeah.
and we got 2 kids. And then, I ended up living in South Italy because of the kids.
Wow. Hey, that's great.
Yeah, I have 2 kids. My son is 10,
That's awesome.
and my daughter is 13 now. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's great, bro. That's great. But
Yeah,
where in southern Italy are you living?
near Napoli, near Napoli.
Oh, which do you like more? Do you like Italy or Norway more to live?
I think like what is good in Norway is bad here. What is bad here is good in Norway. You know, and but like I just spent like 2 months in Norway now,
Uh-huh.
and I really like that country. I really like it.
Wow.
I love
Wow.
it.
So you
Yeah.
speak Norwegian and stuff?
Yes, 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 yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
That's
like,
great.
and I love Brazil, and but Italy is a place that I can't feel like really attached to. I don't know why.
Ah,
I I,
interesting.
I feel like coming here because of my kids. I have my
Yes.
place, I have my apartment, so on.
Yes.
But it's
Yes.
always like 2 months here, 2 months work, 2 months here, 2 months working. It was like that
I'm
before the crisis, before COVID.
yeah, I'm having a challenge feeling connected here too. It's very interesting. I always fancied myself as a person who could just pick up and move somewhere and I did.
Hmm.
And picked up and like now I'm like I really that has been a challenge. Yeah, that has been
Yeah.
a challenge figuring out like just what to connect to work wise. Building community at this age was really different. When you have a kid, you spend so much time with the child.
Which part of Canada
So
are you in now?
I live in Western Canada. We live out here in Calgary, which is
Yeah,
really
it's
like
English
the
speaking,
plains.
right? English
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's good, but I think Toronto would probably have been a little simpler for me.
Hmm.
But whatever, man. It's good. I mean, bottom line, man, once the pandemic is over, it's not that hard. It's more just once the pandemic, it's made it harder because if I leave, I have to quarantine, and
Hmm.
other than that, it's not a big deal.
But you are the son of migrants that came to the US,
Yes,
and now
yes,
and now your kid is this daughter, right, of a migrant,
yeah.
American migrant that arrived in Canada. How are you going to how do you see happen to her what happened to you, like
I
about
know.
identity? How did
Um, well, it's really interesting because my wife and her family also migrated from Sri Lanka during the Civil War there, and yeah, so it's very interesting. I don't know, like Canada, like and she's Olivia will be American and Canadian. She has a U.S. passport and an American. So who knows? I mean, we'll just talk to her about it. She's only 3 right now. But yeah, my dad, it's a crazy thing today because what's really strange is you know, all this stuff going on in the States.
Hmm.
It's really bizarre. Like I never would have thought in the when I was growing up that we'd have this kind of situation going on. I mean, yeah, of course you always know there's a lot of racism and stuff going on, but it's almost like a we're in a very dangerous position, right?
Yeah,
Fragile
because
moment.
somehow racism became like unified in one voice, in a very powerful voice of a person sitting in a very
Yeah.
powerful chair, right?
Yeah, I mean, race and the I think because I'm working on a story about a town in I'm working on a short film in a town in Bloomington, Indiana, about a
Escondido.
guy. What's that?
Escondido, right?
Oh no, this one is in Bloomington. I did a
Right.
project in Escondido,
Yeah, right.
but in Bloomington,
Mm.
I'm working on a story that's kind of focused on a. Hold on, make sure this. Um, Let me just make sure that sound is off, man. We don't want those. Uh, oh, here we go. I can do not disturb. Okay, great. That's better. Um, yeah. So I'm working on a few different things, but this project really focused on a young guy who was attacked on July 4th. A black guy was attacked, threatened with lynching, and
Mhm.
then the journalist who kind of broke the story also was laid off by this hedge fund
Mhm.
um, in town. So he's an independent journalist, and both are really dealing as they speak their own truth. They're dealing with this incredible backlash of witnessing what's going on as this real increasing alienation in the local community happens and reflects what's going on in the United States. Um, Very strange times, man.
Mhm.
Um, it feels very, very bizarre what's happening to our country,
Mhm.
but I'm hoping that cooler heads will prevail
Yeah.
in the next few months. But we
Yeah.
shall see. We shall see.
Well, I mean, this is, if it is any consolation, it's not just happening in the US, it's
No.
happening, many places and,
Yeah.
all around, like,
Yeah.
but somehow the US managed to right now, I mean, at least the thing exploded in a control, I mean, so far, so like in a
Yeah.
controlled situation, right? So that people
Yeah.
can, like, the institutions are take care of that.
I
But
hope so.
how do you think that's going to happen? Like, in the day that Biden takes over, do you think?
Mm. So really good question. It's very hard to know. Um, I do think that this situation is much further along
Mhm.
than the authorities, than the government really is recognized, or at least moderate government people. I think a lot of people are out of touch with what's on the ground. This stuff has been going on for a long time,
Mhm.
as we know, um, but it is very worrisome because it's kind of gotten into the psyche of a generation,
Mhm.
and I'm very worried that you know Trump or no Trump, this level of just it's like different realities existing in the same place
Mhm.
is very worrisome. So, I mean, inauguration day is one thing. I do have a feeling that the Biden administration is going to use everything they have
Mhm.
within the government, which is a lot, when to go and shut down and repress leaders,
Mhm.
and use the full extent of the law. And I do have a feeling that they're going to do that. It does
Mhm.
kind of concern me just shutting down all these tech, just shutting down. I mean, he had 90 million followers. I I certainly don't agree with
Exactly.
any
Yeah.
with Trump, what he believes in,
Mhm.
but it's kind of crazy time because if they do that to the right, I mean, you can do that to the left, and you can
Yes,
do that to
exactly.
anybody,
Do you know
and
one thing that
very difficult. very
Yeah.
difficult questions.
Yeah, because I was, thinking about this Twitter thing,
Yeah.
if it is censorship or not, that's one question. But another question that I had in mind, it's that for as good or as bad the Twitter that Trump produced during all these years, they
Hmm.
they are historical documents. They turn to,
Yes.
and for
Yes.
example, if someone wants to understand the history throughout those documents, these documents are not available anymore for example, for me to go there and, somehow, it becomes like property of a private company to delete
Hmm.
or to make it accessible history, which is,
Oh,
you know, which in
I'll
the end
tell
of the
you,
day, it's, you know,
I've been thinking a lot about that because I'm working on this film.
hmm
Well, because yeah, there have been a lot. I believe all of Trump's tweets are documented and archived in a bunch of different places
yeah,
online,
hmm
and that people have taken those. So that's good with Trump.
hmm
I think I'm working on this film about the main film I'm really working on is this film called The Advocate, which is about these four black activists in Chicago from basically 2016, 2017 on
hmm
until 2020, right now. And they have used Facebook Live, obviously, as their kind of sounding board
hmm
for many years. And exactly what you're talking about
hmm
is really this is the kind of generation that um, is changing America. It led to George Floyd. It's just done so many things. And we had, Martin Luther King wrote his, letters from Birmingham jail. We have these things, but with these ones, they can disappear in a heartbeat.
in a
And
heartbeat.
I think we need like an archive of this stuff.
Yeah,
We've downloaded a bunch of the individuals that we are
yeah.
following. We've downloaded as much as the Facebook Live and Instagram posts that we're following. But it's fascinating because it really does. That's how the movie is made. We're basically like blending their narrative voice that they use through Facebook and making these kind of split screen narrative that goes between split screen, multi
Mhm,
screens to back to single screen. So it sort of blends my verite footage with their narrative voice and their sort of
mhm,
conversations online over the last 5 years.
mhm,
The main character, who kind of is the main voice, really is able to tell his story very strongly through Facebook and sees it as an archive, sees it as a document of his life.
mhm.
And so I think it's a very important question.
Yeah,
How do we, and I don't think anybody is really taking it on because it's just, um, it's almost like it's a really interesting space between private and public, right?
yeah, yeah. And in some levels, it's not just like a private and public, but also like spiritual. Because, for example,
Yeah, oh,
I
for
mean, I
sure.
have I have friends that died, and their profiles on Facebook
Hmm.
is still there. And then
Oh,
every birthday and so on, people go there. I miss you, and they talk like in the first person, as if the
yes,
person was still existing,
yes,
alive. The person exists because we love the person anyhow.
yes,
But
yes.
they go there, and I have to admit, like I have sent a message to other friend that passed away,
Mm,
like on a private,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
which is like, it goes to this spiritual level.
Oh, for sure. And the connection between, um, I mean, just it's just so fascinating because the levels of, two pieces I've done have been. I did another piece called Cenotaph, which took all these videos off of Facebook and digital videos of sort of what we're some of the violence we're seeing that we're being kind of um, inundated with that surround us in the community.
Hmm
And then the video I was working on of the community and just sort of blending them in a 12 screen thing. And the space between spiritual, physical, metaphysical, and digital,
hmm
like is is all blending.
Hmm.
And I think that's where there was a very, it's not my idea, but there was a very interesting article about this generation of MAGA and
Hmm.
QAnon,
Yeah, yeah.
because these people are believing a different um reality.
One of
And
his leaders was a shaman. Did you see the guy,
oh
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
that was like a kind of a spiritual thing for them, like, you know, half Viking, half Nazi, half, you know,
Oh my God.
he was.
And the game, yeah, and the gamification of it, the kind of um yeah, it's you, and that's this article was basically just arguing that we can't rely on facts. It's not facts that's going to convince anybody.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can't be like, oh, this is a fact. You convince them. It's more, we're going to have to sort of, this was
Yeah,
arguing that you have to find the people who are in those, who you know, who are going into that world. And when you can, try to reach them in a physical space that
hmm,
you can kind of converse and connect.
yeah. And you know,
Not so much trying to get them to believe something that you believe.
yeah, and you know, like photojournalists, right? Like we are photographers, and you know, I see so many photographers doing like very different work. Like
Hmm.
they have like their own language. Some of them
Yes.
like, you know, black and white, very mossy,
Yeah.
you move, and someone like straight. And
Yeah.
how do you think like how do you think that people will understand what we do if they are understand, or how are they receiving the work we do today, in your opinion?
Oh, great question. How do they receive the work? I think it's I think it's kind of depends on the context. I think that people who are on in the younger people just see photography and visuals as a as like just a flow of their life.
Hmm.
The video, the stills, all of it kind of is like this flow of a conversation. And so they don't see I don't think that they see as much of a difference
Hmm.
between a distinction between photojournalism, black and white. They just like, hey, if it's black and white, they just turn black. Oh, that's cool.
Hmm.
And I think that's the majority are seeing it that way. You know, like it's like with Facebook Live and with the way that people are texting and communicating and showing and telling their own stories on so often, you know, TikTok. And I think that this stuff is becoming just kind of incorporated into a large flow of a conversation. And
Hmm.
whereas before we were seen as like photographers and photojournalists were seen as sort of some form of arbiter of another way of understanding the world.
Hmm.
I think that's really changed in the larger public. I
Hmm.
do still think there are people who understand that, look, photojournalism and news photography has a role in bearing witness
Hmm.
to what's going on. But I think documentary photography is really niche. And I think those pictures, when people see them, they just like, oh, okay, you know, and they if they see them, they're just gonna be like, oh, that's cool, and grab it and place it into a flow.
Yeah,
I, at least the younger people who I'm around. But I
yeah.
don't know, an older generation probably still understands and values that, you know.
No, because you know, like you know, many photographers that I observe, like, you know, in our profession, you know,
Hmm.
especially since like social media started, where it was like, oh, the new
Hmm.
way of telling story, the new way of telling the story.
Yeah.
We have been
Yeah.
like completely obsessed with this thing. We have to find new ways to tell the story, the narrative, and da da da. And then, you know, like when it was hipstamatic, right? This
Oh
super,
yeah, yeah.
you know, that
Yeah.
people using all this crazy stuff. You know, I was in Libya during the time, and I was so hungry, man. I was so hungry seeing people producing pictures with hipstamatic.
Hipstamatic, yeah.
People
Yeah.
that I saw, people that you know, I still love today. friends that I
Yeah.
still love today, but I couldn't talk with them anymore because they were doing that. So obsessed I
That's so
was with that.
interesting.
So obsessed I was with that because I said, man, I took it as an example, like, the environmental discussion. I say, listen, today we are talking about the environment. We don't want to pollute the environment with, like, waste and whatever. But why are we polluting culture with this shit?
Yeah.
Because
But
this, for,
yeah,
yeah, I was so upset, man.
yeah. I mean, if you can, okay, so for me, it's fascinating because like I used Polaroid in a very specific way to
Mhm.
build bridges, and it was a very physical,
Yeah,
tangible object.
right.
And it had and people had an understanding of that photography in 2010 that's very different from what happened after Hipstamatic.
Right.
So to me, what was really interesting was kind of playing with that line in the on the visual because
Hmm.
in a way the Hipstamatic, like there was one that also uh mimicked wet plate,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And so what I did when I worked, I actually took a line where I made actual wet plates. I did
A proper,
Polaroid, and I was using
right.
Hipstamatic at the same time almost.
Hmm.
But the understanding of it really changed, and the understanding of
Hmm.
analog photography, I think our understanding and belief in analog changed a lot because of Hipstamatic, because of these filters and the larger culture. So yes, there was definitely a pollution, but in another way, the way I viewed it at the time was just that this was another way to continue a conversation that I was having both
Hmm.
visually, photographically, and in the community. Because with the iPhone, I was able to make pictures that were much more um, immediate,
Hmm.
and I could share them. So I kind of like that idea of creating like a ongoing conversation that I could share on social media.
Hmm.
So I like that at the beginning. Now I don't know. Social media just became. It's almost like I stopped. Around 2014, 2015. I didn't really do that much
Hmm.
social media after a while. And I mean, I do some. You know what I mean? Like, but I was
Right.
really do it for a year. I took it like I'm gonna make like almost like a community newspaper online, and it was kind of neat. But at a certain point, um, yeah. So I kind of have a different viewpoint on it, but
Hmm.
I do understand that feeling, especially in certain contexts where you're like people were putting on these filters. I was like, it is really. I mean, yeah, it changed. It changed a lot about how
Yeah.
people understand
Hmm.
and value a moment and a photograph, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I was completely like, say, well, these people are dying in front of us, and you are doing that. And,
Yeah,
and some
yeah,
of these people,
yeah.
these photographers, they themselves nearly died. And I
Yes.
cared about them, I cared about them. And then they said, motherfucker, you are dying here for doing this shit. At least die far from me. You know what I mean? So
Oh my God,
I
yeah.
don't have to cry for you, man. Like, it was like I was so upset you
And
know
what was it that upset you so much about the fact that they would, is it because it was almost like putting a toy over something so serious, or,
it was a combination of that, but
and the ethics of it too?
like especially putting a toy. But I mentioned a difference because there was one photographer. He went to Brazil and he was working for Red Bull, you know,
Ah,
and then the Red Bull, they sponsor all these super radical sports, right? And he
yeah,
was doing
yeah.
downhill in the favelas. There was
Ah,
a
okay. Oh,
favela and then
wow. Yeah,
with
I love that. I've
bicycle,
seen that.
yeah,
Oh my
around
God.
downhill in the favela. So
That's
he
hardcore.
to make that to make that pictures, he used like a normal camera, right? And then the angle was beautiful, the light was amazing. the sky was blue, everybody was happy, and Red Bull was there. But then,
Yes.
at the same time, he made like pictures of the favela with these filters that showed the completely
Mm,
hell, all the things that
mm,
we today see as like
uh,
this, oh,
cliche or
the
something.
cliche, the bias,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then, for me, being Brazilian, I said, man, please, tell me the truth. One of the two here must be a lie, you
Mhm.
know, because,
Yeah.
one of these two pictures
Interesting.
have to be a serious lie, or the favela isn't that bad as you say, or Red Bull is not as good as you say, because I mean, if the solution, do you know what I mean?
I
And
think we know. I think it's both.
exactly. And then, for me, that thing, I said,
That's fascinating.
it bothered me, right, to my bone, man. It's
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and like I mean, I like to discuss like things like to the bone, right? So like how,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but and then I said, wow, in Libya, why are you doing that? I mean,
Mm.
it's like,
No, I guess my problem with the filters was that you sort of there's a digital effect put on the image after you take the picture. And I
mhm,
didn't there was sort of I had sort of an ethical um a bit of an ethical consideration there, but it was something I considered and I thought a lot about. But I also felt like culturally it was this important. I just felt like it was really kind of allowed me to do something a little bit differently in that space and continue a conversation that I was already having about photography.
mhm,
So I'm putting together the South Side book now, and it's really interesting because, these are squares, and the other ones are 3 1/4, 4 1/4, like this.
mhm.
And but they are kind of different. You know what I mean? Like the photographs that I took with the Polaroid are almost slightly more formal,
There
whereas
one thing that the
and I kind of
Polaroid,
like the iPhone, some of that stuff, but
there one thing
yeah,
of the Polaroid, the real Polaroid, that for me, I think it's a real uh, a challenge, which is like
yeah,
you can't hide from the person that you are photographing.
yes, that's right.
Yeah, it's
I
that
like that.
boom, and then
Yes,
I mean, the person sees you have to wait and the and of course you are like not just you are informing the person that, listen, that's it, that's why I came, right? You are
yes,
showing it straight
I
away,
love that. I
man.
love that.
Which is like, I don't know, to be honest with you, if I would be, courageous enough even to do that,
Oh,
because
yeah.
for doing this you have to be really confident about what you're doing, or confident, or really I don't care, one another, you know
For me, what I loved about it was it
yeah,
created a conversation, and
exactly.
it was almost like a back and forth. And it was honestly, I've always felt like honestly, like
Hmm.
the iPhone is very the Apple is very similar to the Polaroid company
Hmm.
because they made an object that is actually really kind of beautiful, right? Like
Hmm.
it has this sort of sleek, like if you look at the Polaroids from the 50s, 60s, 70s, that time, they were like this beautiful object. It folded,
Yeah.
um, they made sense. They were economical, they were beautiful, and then you could share the picture. And so I really enjoyed that process of sharing it with the actual physical object.
Hmm.
And then what I liked about the iPhone is I could also share it
Hmm.
much easier, and it became the culture had changed.
Hmm.
So the culture had changed from the time I was doing the Polaroids the first 10 years,
Hmm.
2000 to 2010 or whatever, 2012. By the time 2012, 13, 14, everybody had phones. I
Yeah.
could text them the picture. They could take their own pictures. They
Hmm.
weren't as afraid of photography. They weren't as afraid of photographers because everybody was taking pictures all the time.
Yeah.
Like when I first came on the block in, in the pocket, people didn't want a photographer, a strange person with a camera around them.
Yeah.
They didn't even want people with a camera around, period,
Right.
because the street people, there were things going on they didn't want documented. And that
Mhm.
the people who had cameras from outside were cops. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
um, and so there, but that has totally changed. Like,
Mhm.
and it was really funny because was shooting with some guys I knew from when they were younger in the neighborhood, some gang guys, who were gang members, whatever. They're just young men who had been in gangs, and they were pretty. We were talking about it, like, man, John, we basically watched over you. Like people wanted to, take you out, hurt you,
Mhm.
for a long. And they're like, but we made sure they didn't. And it was really funny because it was like I never really thought about that. I just always, I mean, I thought about it in terms of, yeah, my own personal safety, but it was also that give and take that was going on both in the working in the school with them because I
Mhm.
was teaching them.
Mhm.
They were in my photo classes, some of those kids.
Mhm.
I was in the school documenting what was happening. And then I was also in the neighborhood, and the school and the neighborhood were like one,
Mhm.
like in that neighborhood, Paul Revere's school was the center. It was the only center of cultural life that
Mhm.
existed when I was there
Right.
from 2000 to 2005. By 2006, 2007, they had built this community center, and that was a bit different. But the time I was really in that little neighborhood teaching, the school was the only center. It's where
Mhm.
everybody could meet. It was where the kids went. It was where kids got meals who didn't have food at home. It was
Mhm.
They had the after school programs. It was the sports life. Generation Several generations of people had gone to that school.
Mhm.
Teachers had taught multiple people in the neighborhood
Mhm.
because people weren't going. They don't leave that neighborhood. I mean, people do leave,
Mhm.
but there's also a segment that wasn't leaving,
But
and so you had,
is
so
that, is this relationship with photography, like for example, your background, like your father, your family came from Germany, right, to the US,
hmm
like after the war, just or during
hmm
the war, right? And
yeah,
that
yeah, there,
makes you like become more interested about migrants and make
yeah,
questions and deep, probably like I'm sure deep questions inside in yourself,
yeah, for sure,
and
man.
for you to travel the world and then say, listen, I have to express this, and okay, then
Yeah,
let's make it through photography.
yeah,
It's like for, I mean, I don't know if having, do you think that having the possibility of making pictures that comes today, like it's default today, it's like,
yeah,
because before it was not default, right? You have to find a way to express yourself, and which one is it? Being a teacher?
yeah,
No. Is it like writing? No. Is it playing basketball? Okay, no. Oh, making pictures. Wow, I found it.
yeah,
It's
yeah. I think, yeah. So, and the question is like, was it a conscious decision or was
no,
it
no. I
just,
mean, do you think that this default action of taking pictures today, everybody take pictures. How
yeah.
will actually, how can people today discover photography as a way,
Mm.
the discovering of photography? You
I
know,
think that they discover it through that process. That because that they're taking pictures with their phone, often they start to like it. And so more people are able to then transition to another type of more serious
right.
photography where they take it as a real passion or a dedication. And I think, what I love about, you know, photography and film at this point, frankly, is that just everywhere in the world, I mean, we're starting to take it for granted that people all over the world are telling their stories now
Mhm.
and that they have the tools to tell their stories. But as you know, like in many countries, people didn't have the tools for many, many years, for
Hmm.
forever.
Hmm.
And it was really a thing of the elite, either in the country or um, in, people coming from outside to tell the stories. And
Hmm.
so that change is extremely powerful. And I think it leads from someone, hey, I'm doing my video of my friends, to, hey, let me get a better video camera. This one kid, I don't know if you remember this picture of this one kid with a t-shirt over his head, and he's like, flexing and stuff. And
Hmm.
that kid, name is Matthias Purnell. You know, he picked up a camera and now he's a videographer.
Hmm.
There's he called me, I think it was 2012, 2013, and now that's what he does. He makes his living doing videos and
Hmm.
videography and film. And, he just picked it up. And that stuff would not, I mean, yes, it was possible before. He
Yeah.
could have figured it out and made his way to all, to some kind of person, and it maybe done it. But it's like now it's just this fluid. It's just, I think it's really an important thing. So I see that, photography has become a part of the language in a way that, Kodak back in the day Kodak was like these snapshots, like I feel like the iPhone cell phone is the snapshot aesthetic, where people, and it's new with video and all these different things, much more complex,
Hmm.
but then that helps transition people to something much, more serious.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's possible. You know,
Mhm. How do
I
you see it?
well, the only thing that I fear, like it's not like a fear. Fear is like the wrong term,
Right.
but it's like the it's almost like losing virginity. It's like
Mm,
having the first love.
yeah,
If
yeah,
you,
yeah,
it's like it's a process. It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
imagine that if everybody was already born in love,
Yes.
you would never experience your
I
first
know.
love. you
No,
know
no, no. I do understand that.
yeah,
There was some, especially with the dark room.
yeah,
There was some with analog and developing your own film. I
yeah.
first developed film when I was like
Hmm.
12, maybe. No, 10, 11.
Hmm.
Like it was at this summer camp, and they had I was able to, I started developing, developing film and seeing the magic of the darkroom, that chemical process.
Hmm.
There's kind of nothing, there's nothing really that compares to that, except Polaroid, which is super outdated and it
Hmm.
doesn't really exist. So, like that experience of putting a piece of paper or taking the film off or pouring that's what I loved about like wet plate. I love about this
Hmm.
film and all analog. It has this whole tactile aspect
Yeah,
that digital. I always feel like with the digital, it's like this.
yeah. But even
It's just
digital
too.
photography can have that. I mean, even digital photography can have it, but because like
I guess, yeah,
learning, but it's kind of a like photographing on manual. If you have to photograph on manual, it's a
yeah,
it's a challenge. It's not that easy. But it's easy, but not, you have to learn something. But it's, the only thing that I miss here is the if the idea of like everybody was born in love, who would know what a first love is? Or if everybody was born already recovered of a big loss, you know, who would
yeah,
know what the first, breakup would have been, like the process,
yeah.
that's what I,
The process is so more, honestly, like, yeah, it's not as it's not as hard.
Hmm.
It's not as it's much more immediate.
Hmm.
It's very like it's not physical. It's not a physical. It's not a tactile. It's a digital thing. It's very
Uh-huh.
different. I mean, just totally different. Like when I shoot digital, it's like it's fun, but um, I love I do these series of pictures where I take the image and then they're called historiologies, and I print pictures and I go to different surfaces and historical markers and grave sites and make
Hmm.
these graphite rubbings on paper. And there's nothing like just I love the physicality of
Hmm.
I loved the physicality of Polaroid. I love watching the film. I love taking the chemicals off. I love rolling film. I love rubbing graphite on paper. I love that stuff.
Yeah. There are
I
two
miss it. I'm not,
questions.
you know.
There are two questions that, regarding this that I want to make to every photographer that I'm talking with.
Okay.
There are two questions that I have been dealing with in my head for a while now, and trying to find an answer. You know, what is photography and what have you learned from it?
Oh man. I mean, for me, photography is just part of life. It's just like an extension of my life. And what I've learned from it, I've learned it so much. Uh, I just learned about the world. You know, I've really been forced to learn about myself and sort of my own limitations about how I feel in physical spaces, getting close to people, what I feel about community, my own identity,
Hmm.
and then of course also about the world. I mean, it's brought me into spaces that I may never have entered, not so much as a passport, just as a way of, existing. Like I don't think I would have ever done a lot of the things in my life without the camera, and that experience has taught me about the world and about inequality and about politics and about from the ground up. It's really taught me what the world how the world works.
Hmm.
So when I see a political thing going on, a law is passed, a lot of the time I've already been traveling with someone who's trying to evade that law or knows or is, you know, a law is passed and then I actually know the impact because I've been with people who are impacted by it.
Hmm.
When I'm doing a story about this for National Geographic, I'm working on this story about this Mexican migrant family that I've known for many years. And it's like, when there's a Trump rally in their town and they tell me, "Oh, you should go photograph it." They don't want to go to that. What is that? I know what that feels like for them, in that house when the Trumpsters are yelling, "Mexicans get out," or whatever, "Go back home."
Hmm.
So it's really and that's from that experience of photography.
Hmm.
And I love that. It's really taught me like what it's like to what our for our country, what our country is, what
Right.
our world is.
You traveled back with your father to Germany to see what he
Yes.
saw there, right? His history, his
Man, you
history
did your
there.
research, man.
I did my research. I do my research. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
uh, what did the photographer John Lowenstein saw there, and what did the person John Lowenstein saw there?
Uh,
You know?
that was more for me. I did photograph it,
Yeah.
but it was less for me a photographic experience and much more to just be with my dad and my brother and his wife and kid as we went back. But it was really powerful because we had never been to
Mhm.
those places, and frankly, maybe had talked about it some with my older brother because my older brother is more the keeper of the family history. But for me, like him being in those spaces was fascinating because it was like we went back to the house where he had been operated on and broke bread with the family where he had like had an appendicitis
Mhm.
and um they wouldn't no hospital would operate on him. And so we went back with the family and we were like we went to the house where he had had the operation, and we were talking with the people who were in that house and in the house eating dinner, and then he went into the garden, which
Exactly.
was my great grandfather's house.
Mhm.
Yeah, my great grandfather's house.
Mhm.
That my great grandfather ended up dying in the camp in Auschwitz, but um, here we were, and it was
Mhm.
like then we went to the. I mean, in terms of history, like I think for me, I've sort of been like feeling a little rootless.
Yeah.
Like I feel very connected to the states, like the States are my home, but I've always felt like maybe there's a point where I'll have to leave or go do something else, like go somewhere else. Um, and in that process, going to the cemetery and seeing how our family's gravestones were big, and then throughout, like from the 1850s or something, 1800s to the 1930s, when they stopped at the cemetery, the gravestones were getting smaller and smaller.
Hmm.
But even seeing that we had this history in this town
Right.
that was just kind of erased, like they could just almost erase it.
Hmm.
It was really powerful. It
Did he
was
ever
crazy. And for
receive
my, yeah,
the German citizenship back?
yes, yeah, we got, he went for that in 2003, I think. He got his citizenship and he got us citizenship passports. It doesn't pass on to Olivia, my daughter, but it's good for us. And he did do that, and he did that specifically because he was afraid that there could be a fascist movement of some sort and a need to leave the United States
Hmm.
at some point. I don't know what we're seeing today,
Yeah.
but he is not really a paranoid person at all or anything. I just think he thought, hey, might as well do it. It doesn't hurt us, doesn't cost much, so it makes sense. So we
Yeah.
did do that. His brother did not. His brother did not want to get his citizenship back. My
Right.
uncle really was adamant not to regain German citizenship. And I think his brother went back once, I believe, to Germany, and that was enough for him. My dad had gone back to Germany a lot because
Hmm.
he worked with some German um, companies, and he was working with German doctors. And, my dad's an anesthesiologist and did a lot of research, and
Hmm.
he was always working with people all over the world, teaching them about the stuff that he learned. He was a real educator. So he worked with people all over the world and went back to Germany, I think, in the 60s for the first time, or the
Right.
70s. I'm not sure. But so had a little bit different relationship, but he never went back to his hometown until we went back.
Together.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
So that was a bit, it's sort of like could go to the country, but not, yeah,
Yeah. No, because for me, the greatest question, when I think of young photographers, is
yeah,
how to tell young photographers today that such kind of personal experiences
yeah,
that you have, because these
yeah,
people, they do have this kind of experience.
yes,
Photography can be a medium for that, you
yes,
know and then to
yeah,
have people to embrace those experiences that I know that great photographers, they do have you
yeah,
know
yeah. I think, like, when I think about, identity and photography, it also worries me a little bit that I believe fully that people should tell their own story and be empowered to tell their own story about their own community.
Mhm.
But I'm also, to me, like, I spent a lot of time in the Black community, and I'm not Black,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
photographing, and but I see that as an American story. I see
Yeah.
that as out. It's like we're all interconnected, and all these stories of migration, of identity, of community, fighting to tell people's stories who aren't really, or hadn't had their opportunity to tell their own story as well, I felt was important. And I think, the main thing is doing it with respect and knowing why you're working on the thing, like whatever you're working on, really thinking clearly about that and being able to, when people talk to you about it
Mhm.
and ask you, it's really important you understand why you're there. Because
Yeah.
if you're not from the place, then you should really understand, okay, what is it you're talking, what is it you're trying to understand? What is it you're looking at? I
Mhm.
remember this guy came up to me, and I was Emmett Till's mom. They put a plaque for Emmett Till on this in Chicago on 71st Street, and it's overlooks the you know he was buried. His funeral was on 71st Street. And it's called Emmett Till Way, and they had a plaque for him and his mom. And I was doing a grave rubbing on the plaque, and so I had this big piece of paper over the plaque, and I'm rubbing on it. and this is like 2015 or something, right after Ferguson, 2014.
Mhm.
And the guy comes up to me and he was so mad. And he was like, "What are you doing?" And all he could see was like a white dude defacing this brass memorial to one of the most horrific markers in American history, and one of the most courageous people was Memento Mele, the mom, and it was like all he could see, and so he immediately was like very aggressive, and he was
Mhm.
asking, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" And I was like, "Well, this is why I'm doing it," and I was able to talk to him about why I was making this series of photographs and drawings and
Mhm.
historiologies and talking about what's going on, the violence and the different things happening with the projects and people being displaced and these political, I talked to him about all these things,
Mhm.
and he looked at me, he goes, "Oh, okay, you're cool." And he was like, because I was able to verbalize and communicate, and I had thought a lot about that.
Mhm.
And so when someone came up to me and thought I wasn't like, I'm not defacing that. I'm actually trying to make a memorial to it.
Mhm.
And so it's really interesting. And I think that's one of the things we're not teaching. We need to teach because a lot of people pick up and they have this incredibly powerful tool in their hand. They have such a power to share that information, but there is not enough education.
Mhm.
There's not enough understanding of the power of it, and
Mhm.
frankly, the ethics
Yeah.
of what it takes. Because it it is a very powerful images and words have incredible resonance with people. And
This
so,
you say like because for me all this resumes like into a human story because, for example,
yes.
you said I'm photographing the black community, the African American community, but I'm not black. But
Yep.
today society is so crazy that people
Yep.
start good people that know that they are bad and people that think they are good. Some are saying, oh, the Jewish people are not white, and the others are saying the Jewish people are not black. And then like I say, listen, I have seen, I have seen all this
Hold on
is.
one second. Oh, I don't. Sorry, small
You know,
guy.
I've seen all
Sorry
these.
about that. So yeah.
Yeah, I have seen all these discussions. That they say, listen, who are you actually? What are you actually trying to say? I mean,
Yeah,
who are you? Why do you have to find someone to blame?
I
But
know.
we're coming close to the end. We're like an hour
Okay.
talking already, and I have
Yeah.
two questions that I would like to do to you again. What is photography, and what have you learned from photography?
Um, um, I didn't answer them well enough.
Well, I don't know. So
What is photography?
and what have you
Photography is
learned from
life.
photography?
Photography is life. I mean, it's a part, it reflects my life and it reflects what I understand about the world. But what I love about photography, for me, that's what it is. But for, someone else, it could be something completely different. Like I learned that when I worked at the camera store way back, when I was just starting and I worked at this little camera store and I was developing, I would give people their pictures, their family pictures or whatever they came in, and the reactions, everybody had a different reaction when they picked at that time, you'd pick up your pictures and you'd look through them and everybody would open them immediately. Most people would open immediately and look through them, and it would just be every kind of emotion
Mhm.
on people's faces. And it was like, this is so powerful and so cool. And so for me, photography is, yeah, just an extension of my own life and what I'm trying to understand about the world, either photography or film. Something when I have a question that I can't really figure out, I'm working through that visually. I'm working through it with the camera, writing, these different things. And then what the last question is what I learned from it.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, I've learned, you know, I've learned so much about the world through photography. And I really think the people like having that opportunity, thank you. And the people, my wife, I don't know, some people are coming over. I have to put my mask on.
Modern
So,
times.
there really is this feeling that it's a gift, that I've learned that there's a gift in life, and that photography has taught me that life is a gift. You know, witnessing all these different beautiful things in life, and honestly, some of the most horrific things you can imagine,
Mm.
I think has been this, yeah, it's taught me that life is a gift, that every day is a gift, and that we can't take it for granted. And that sounds like a cliche, but it's really true, because it's weird when you go and you see these things in your backyard that are happening, that are ignored, you know, murders and killing, and it's literally outside your door.
Mhm.
You really, and it's, you know, this is the United States.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
this is when people storm the Capitol. This violence is
mm,
human, and it's part of us, and that's, you know, that's a bad way to end. But I mean, I really believe that the photography has taught me the good and the bad, and in what's inside of us.
very good, brother. Thank you very much. We've been talking already for
Thank
an
you.
hour, and
Hey man, it's great to talk to you.
yeah,
These are great questions. I didn't know what
yeah,
you were going to ask, but I
yeah,
really, really appreciate you putting, putting this together, and let me know what you're doing with it and where it goes, and I'll just share it, and
very good.
whatever else you need, if there's any follow-up or photographs or anything you need from me, let me know.
Very well. Thank you very much, man. Take care
Okay.
of yourself,
Yeah,
man.
really good to see you, man.
Good seeing you too.
Thanks, brother.
Bye bye, brother.
Bye.